The more and more we talk about possible conference realignment and expansion, the more I feel as though we need to start these live streams with some kind of dramatic soap opera music. We need to look into that. I will have our music library folks look into some sinister kind of soap opera music to set the mood, set the stage for our conversation about conference realignment. Yes. Welcome into the Voice of College Football on a Friday, in which many of you are watching the NCAA basketball tournament. I got to say that I saw Michigan State beat USC. I had the game on. I saw that it was close at halftime, and Michigan State, in a matchup of future Big Ten rivals, marched on to the victory there. Other than that, it was on the TV for some of the afternoon when I was home, but didn't really pick up on anything of note. I've left the link there in the comment section, as we typically do, to invite your calls on college football. So I've got three things we're going to hit, unless you hijack the show, call me, and we take it in another direction, because unless there is something just so major that we have to talk about it, we design these shows to be produced by you first and foremost. So if you have anything you would like to discuss in college football, of course, give me a call. The link is in the comments section. But we're going to talk conference realignment and the latest that we can pull together right now. We will also address scheduling across college football. We have a scheduling format that has been set for the Pac-12, the ACC, and we are still waiting. We got the current schedule going forward for the Big 12 for the 2023 season, so we know how they're going to handle 2023 scheduling with the four newcomers mixed in with Oklahoma and Texas. But going forward, once OU and Texas leave, don't have anything definite from the Big 12. We have speculation concerning the Big 10, and the SEC has been much in the news in the last couple of weeks concerning the SEC schedule and what they're going to do. I, of course, have my suggestions. I've left some videos posted here in the last few weeks, but I want to take it a little bit further in regards to my suggestions and recommendations, because this is not something new in terms of what we've tackled here at the Voice of College Football and my view on protected games or rivalry games that need to be protected in each conference, and why everything needs to be so static and formatted and set and uniform. I don't think that's necessary. We'll get to that in just a second here at the Voice of College Football. And also, we're going to size up a Big Ten SEC challenge. Writer Matt Hayes was the latest that I saw that set up an SEC versus Big Ten football challenge. Of course, there's an ACC Big Ten basketball challenge. I think that's also extended to the Big 12 and the SEC, I believe, maybe. But for years and years, 25 years, something in that range, we've had an ACC Big Ten basketball challenge, which, of course, is not nearly as impactful to the basketball season, since they play close to 30 to 35 games as opposed to football. And we'll talk about the downside of this, but it's fun to talk about. It's fun to look at the matchups. It's fun to try to predict or speculate on who would win these matchups. And so we'll size up the Big Ten and the SEC and what those matchups would look like for a week blocked off for those two conferences to go head to head in 2023 based on last year's standings. Again, appreciate everybody being here at the Voice of College Football. We've got about 60 folks on the line. What you want to do is, of course, like the video before we get started, get settled in, but of course, just hit the like button. That's a lot of work to do, so we want you to do that first. Get that out of the way. That's the click that takes 0.8 seconds. And then, of course, invite your friends here. So if all of you invite about 10 friends, then we go to about 600 on the line. So invite at least 10, get them in here at the Voice of College Football. We'll be here, I'm guessing, for a couple hours. All right. First and foremost, while we wait for our first phone call, is, of course, to get to the latest in the realignment talk. Posted a video yesterday, I believe it was yesterday, concerning basically my response or reaction to the Arizona State athletic, or not the athletic director, the president from Arizona State, Michael Crow, and the statements that he made, because I don't know if these two Arizona schools, speaking of Arizona and Arizona State, maybe they're just hanging by a thread to the Pac-12 and not showing much loyalty, or they're really speculating because they seem to be talking, both of these presidents, talking about both Crow and Robert Robbins, in terms of speaking out of both sides of their mouth in very short statements. We're not talking about 25-minute interviews in which at some point they, make a statement that seems to be contrary to the major theme of what they're trying to convey. No, in one statement, they say both of them have done this, have shown extreme loyalty, commitment to a unified Pac-12, getting through this rights deal, stabilizing the conference, and moving forward. And then they seem to immediately back off of that and just completely lift the veil to let us know we're talking to the Big 12, and the Big 12 is aggressive, and we're here and we're talking to the Big 12, and who knows. And the comment made by Robbins in the latest report, and this was in a conversation that Robbins, the Arizona president, had with The Athletic. Yes, wanted to get that source correct, that I saw in an article posted by The Athletic, is that if there are a couple defectors from the Pac-12, well, then it could just all blow up. So he didn't use his words too cautiously there. When you say blow up, when you're talking about and responding to questions about a conference and the stability of the conference and the future of the conference, and you use the term blow up, that's not going to be taken too well. Now, maybe he's just loose with his words, or maybe he was letting us know, hey, that's exactly where we stand. Whether it's going to be some combination of us, meaning for him, Arizona and Arizona State, and if we leave the rest of that conference, boy, it could just implode from there. Or if we have a Washington, Oregon defection, or Oregon, Washington, Cal, Stanford defection to either the Big 12 or the Big 10, then the rest of it's going to implode. All right, so we lined up the dominoes for you in the previous video in terms of what I believe are the dominoes and the most likely order of those dominoes falling. So check it out, and we will go from there. All right. We've got Terrence here. John's here. Rodney's here. Good to see you there. Hummus Hero as well. Doug and others. Appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. I will drop the link back in the chat as well. Please join the show if you would like to talk some college football. We do not have to talk realignment. If truth be known, I would rather not talk realignment. The subject is kind of boring me at this point. Somebody do something. Most likely it's going to be the Pac-12 rights deal. So I've not exhausted my thoughts on this, so we might as well trudge on through. Let's carve this up here. So again, the presidents at Arizona and Arizona State are the most open about this situation. We have heard the most from them. And again, they have made statements like committed to the Pac-12, committed to seeing a rights deal. We believe the rights deal is going to be a good one. The same athletic, or I'm sorry, I constantly want to say athletic director because that's typically who we hear from. The same president, Robbins, who made the statement that he believes that the rights deal for the Pac-12 could be better than the Big 12's rights deal, which I doubt highly, said later in the statement that maybe it blows up. All right. But we will continue on with my thoughts on that. And again, more fun stuff to come. An SEC Big Ten Challenge, and also scheduling thoughts that I have for the Big Ten, the SEC, and others. The real MVP's here. What's going on?
Oh, nothing much, Mark. Seems like the Pac-12 is continuing their slow decaying death on the side of the road, proverbially speaking, Mark.
It seems like it. Um, this isn't my deal in terms of trying to predict whether conferences are going to fail. That's why I take it from the mouths of the presidents, and then I look at other situations, and the rights deal is going to tell us a whole bunch. If they can come in with a rights deal that's competitive to the Big 12, I would not expect any of them to leave. I think another factor in this is I'm hearing about George Kliavkov's desire to get a grant of rights deal, much like what the ACC has. I'm sure it wouldn't be nearly as long to get these schools to sign a grant of rights. And he made those statements back in the fall when there was more stability and the Pac 12 looked to be okay. I don't know what would force or how they could possibly leverage any of these schools to sign a grant of rights. They just want them to stay in play and stay with the conference, but I don't see any leverage to get them to sign one.
Well, I don't think there's any. I don't think they have any leverage on any issue. But I don't think the full disaster is still set in for these athletic directors and stuff because you mentioned it that they can be equivalent to the Big 12, and I just don't see how they can even think that they're going to be equal to the Big 12 or get more money than the Big 12.
So the only thing that I can't answer, we can speculate, we can talk about it, we can make an educated guess based on what we know about you know, the academic portion of it, the culture portion of it, the history, the brands, the travel expenses, and other issues that would arise in some of these schools. Some of them wouldn't be any further away from taking on a lot of the Big 12 than they would the Pac 12, although now you're talking about going all the way out to Florida and Ohio and West Virginia to play schools. But I got to think that they all have a number in their head, meaning all these Pac 12 presidents have a number in their head in terms of where this needs to get them to. So, does this need to get within $3 million per season of the Big 12? And they say at that point, that's not a big enough gap to get us to leave. So we're staying. What is that number for them? I don't know.
Right. And something else that I heard was when Texas and Oklahoma are going to leave for the SEC, the Big 12 is going to get like $100 million for those teams leaving early, something like that.
Yes.
Do you think there's any chance the Big 12 could throw that money and say, Arizona, we'll give you $10 million as a signing bonus, for example, just to come into our conference?
Unless there is something that's already been earmarked on that money or some type of agreement within the conference of where that money's headed, I would think that they could.
Right. So I think that should also be somewhat factored into these discussions when we're talking about it, because even if the grant of rights or the TV deal money is somewhat equal, the Big 12 has that war chest of money that the Pac 12 just doesn't have.
True. Yeah,
Yeah.
based on what we know.
Right.
And it was at least 100 million.
Right. Which I consider significant amount of money. I mean, maybe to these universities, an extra 10 million, 15 million isn't a lot of money, but
I wouldn't think that that would sway a university's decision about their entire athletic future and academic future to a certain extent.
no, you wouldn't think so, but it couldn't hurt, Mark. It can only be a net positive for the Big 12. In no world can it be a net negative that they have this extra money.
I would think that the other schools, so if it would get beyond 10 or 15 million dollars, or maybe even at that amount of money, that the other schools in the Big 12 would think, why do they get a signing bonus?
Maybe. I mean, it just depends on where it goes because it seems like the Big 12 is very aggressively trying to
Yeah.
poach away the Pac 12. And, also, I think if the grant of right, the media deal isn't nearly where the Pac 12 wants it, I think Oregon and Washington, the Big 10, could happen like literally the very next day.
Yeah. Again, they've had so much time to think about this and know what the number needs to be. And I know that there are other considerations to make, but if they've done their homework, and again, we're talking about universities that spend their time figuring out contingency plans and budgets for the future. I heard the other day that Florida State has itself budgeted out to like 2040. So they're planners. This is what they're paid to do. So you got to think that as soon as that number comes in, not that there won't be some deliberation over it, but when that number comes in, they're going to know, okay, well, we've already figured out where our line in the sand is, so we can make a move on this pretty quickly.
Right, exactly. And one of the key things that the Big 12 has over the Pac 12 is just the stability. And I don't think it's talked about, but I don't think it's talked about enough. Like the Pac 12, I would say, has the best two programs in Oregon and Washington. But because the Big 12 is just so average, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but they're just so average that they're kind of like too good, but yet too bad at the same time. Does that make sense? They're so good that they can be a competitive conference, but they're so bad that nobody wants them outside of the Big 12.
Oh,
Is that
absolutely. I said that from day one after the last moves of USC and UCLA. And then once the Big 12 got the 4 additional schools, that they are not competing with the Big 10 or the SEC with those 4 additional schools and what they've got. They're not competing at the elite level. So that's the downside. The good side is that there was talk early on that maybe the Big Ten would like the likes of Kansas and Iowa State, Kansas because of basketball and Iowa State because of a rivalry with Iowa. But we have soon found that not to be true because it doesn't add television ratings value to their contract and would take too much money away from the rest of their school. So once we came to that reality of what standards the Big Ten's looking at in particular, and the SEC, but more so the Big Ten, because there was that geographical connection that it was quickly determined by myself and others. Yeah, that the Big 12 is actually in a good place based on its mediocrity. Its mediocrity is protecting it. It doesn't have any brands that are really targets left for the SEC and the Big Ten.
right? Exactly. And I saw one of them. It might have been the Arizona or Arizona State president that they've basically conceded that they're going for third place. That their ceiling is third place going forward, Mark.
Their presidents said this?
I saw on CBS Sports say it was with Arizona. I think it was their AD or president, something like that. They posted it. They had an interview with them, and they said, "Yeah, we're just going for the bronze medal at this point."
Oh, that's what you want to hear out of your athletic director.
Yeah, they're just going for the bronze medal. They were talking about the money and said, well, they're going to be able to get better facilities, better coaches, better mental health departments. And then at the end said, those conferences already got those things. So, I mean, it just seems like they've completely resigned themselves to the fact that they're never going to be as good as the SEC and Big Ten, which I find it interesting because we all know it, but I don't think it should be said out loud by one of the people that are trying to compete with them. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, even if people know better, you want to give the public statement that, in anything you do, but we'll talk about athletics and academic life. The university should be saying that we want to be the best in everything. That's why we're here. We are here for excellence.
Right.
That should be just a standard statement that they make.
Well, apparently it's not that standard.
Especially when their previous, and I can't speak to the other sports. I know that Arizona State has been amazing in baseball in previous decades, and Arizona, obviously, in basketball, despite what happened this weekend, is obviously a basketball power. Uh, but it's not like that they've been a complete joke at various times in their history that they could get away with saying that they're competing for championships.
Right. It's also kind of ironic because they're calling themselves the Conference of Champions, Mark. I feel like there's some ironicness in that.
Well, you know why they do.
Yeah, because they have more championships than every other conference, which is valid.
Yeah, it is valid. I
But
would
when
say
you
the
have
same
somebody
thing.
in there saying we're competing for the bronze medal, you know, it's an ironic statement. Those two things seem like they're in conflict. But what date, Mark, do you think the Pac-12 needs to sign a media rights deal by?
I don't think so. From everything we gather, everybody's reporting that this is weeks away, meaning just a couple weeks, not weeks and weeks and weeks like we're going to wait forever, but meaning it's intimate. It's imminent. So that's what I'm going to go by. I don't think that there's a big rush. I don't think that Pac-12 schools that are vying for or contemplating a move to the Big 12 need to know tomorrow. We're sitting here in mid-March, and it wouldn't take hold for this season. So I don't think there's any big rush on it, but I think the Pac-12 loses its. I am no net master negotiator, but I've seen it play out in sports and in other businesses. And when an entity has the is losing the leverage battle, and clearly the Pac-12 is in a desperate situation, and any media potential partner knows that, and the longer it drags on, the more desperate they are, and the less leverage they have. So they need to figure out how to put their best foot forward, their best negotiating tact, and get it done now, or they're just going to continue to be less and less valuable. And I would think that all these networks and all these streaming services, they don't need the Pac-12. That's just an added bonus to their menu. It's not necessary for any of them to cover and carry Pac-12 football. It's not like it's an expectation when people sign up on Amazon that they get Pac-12 football. So they're in a bad place because they're not needed.
Right. And I think a portion of that can be contributed to them waiting so long and getting the Big 12 swooping out from underneath them in line. And part of it can be the quality of product they put on the field over the last decade, about a decade now.
And just to contrast that, to make it more clear, when anyone, and I'll just take it back to the, a place that most of us can relate to, when you sign up for cable, if you move to a new house in a new city and you sign up for cable, you have certain expectations. They're going to have all the ESPN channels. If you like news, they're going to have CNN, Fox, MSNBC. If you're going to have basic expectations of what's there. Nobody has an expectation signing up for Amazon. People already have Amazon. People aren't, they're not expecting that the Pac-12 is going to be there. So this is just icing on the cake, per se, for these outlets to be able to offer Pac-12 athletics.
Yeah, exactly. It's a nice addition, but I don't think it's going to be the main course, especially if they're competing on the same days as the SEC and the Big Ten going forward.
Yeah. I just, putting it in those terms, wow.
Right. And also, Mark, let me ask you this. What percentage of streaming do you think would be on to worry you for the Pac-12? If you look at it in 75% streaming,
yeah,
are we going to think, my goodness, this is bad?
I am going to tend to think that. I do think that streaming needs to be a component, and obviously it's more, every season it's more of a option or a thought, or it's more of uh, a component to more and more Americans' lives, and more Americans are comfortable with it and partake in it. So, it's certainly more of a viable option and more valuable today than it was 3 years ago or 5 years ago. So the NFL's there and people are used to it. So, I don't know where to place that level of concern, but I know that we're not at the place that the average American hits Saturday afternoon and they're looking all over a streaming device to try to find college football games, when it's just so much easier to flip on whether they've got cable or YouTube or Hulu or whatever they've got, and just watch college football that's convenient for them to watch. That's also better college football generally.
Right. And the key distinction I think that needs to be made is the NFL does not have any competition on Thursday night when they play their football game. The Pac 12 will. And I don't know how much of a difference that's going to make, but I feel like that has to make a difference.
Well, sure it does. Even right now, being on Fox and ESPN, the Pac 12 has generally the lowest rated games.
Right.
I'm going to have to step away for hopefully just like 2 seconds. DeReal, appreciate you calling.
Yeah, no problem, Mark. Good talking to you. Hopefully the Pac 12, for their sake, they can get this figured out.
Thanks, DeReal.
No problem.
Sorry about that. Somebody's banging on the front door out there. Left a box. So whatever that is. All right. So again, our key points, we've covered many of them with realignment, and some other things to take into consideration here. Again, that Big 12 deals at $31.7 million per season per team. And Robbins, the Arizona athletic director, I keep saying athletic director, president, told the Athletic that he hopes that the Pac 12 is going to do better than that. I just can't imagine that's going to be the case. This grant of rights that George Klyavkov was so adamant about is going to be a must for these programs once they sign a deal. I just can't imagine what leverage there is to force the schools to sign a grant of rights. I don't get that. SMU and San Diego State are obviously waiting for this media rights deal. It's going to be better. It's going to be better. So SMU and San Diego State are in an interesting place because they know that the worst Pac-12 rights deal that they could imagine is still going to be better than what they're earning in their current conference. So the money's not, it's an issue. Of course, they want to have the best deal possible, but I have not looked up the numbers to American Conference and Mountain West media deals, but I got to think if the Pac-12, it has been in the $32 million range and is projected to be more like 22 to 25 million, that the Mountain West, and if you look at TV ratings, oh my goodness, for as low as the Pac-12 is generally behind the SEC and the Big Ten, you could multiply that by 3 in terms of a percentage and go down to American Conference and especially Mountain West games. So you got to think, and again, I am spitballing this. I'm sure the information's out there somewhere, but it's just not as readily available because there's just not as much interest by you, the college football fan, by us, the college football fans, in looking up American Conference and Mountain West media rights deals. But they've got to be paying these teams 10 or 12 million. If the Pac-12's last contract was in the $30 to $32 million per team range, I got to think that it's a third of that, or maybe it's half, maybe it's $15 million per team. So SMU and San Diego State are going to make more money regardless. But I would think that they're leery to jump on board and waiting to see what the Four Corner schools are going to do. The other thought in this is that, I thought of this the last few days in looking at the latest move that we had, USC and UCLA. Who forecasted that? Well, there are some people in media that said that they forecasted it just prior to, but in terms of some kind of overall thinking that any of us would have had about where the Big Ten would expand, nobody thought USC and UCLA. It was outside the box. So I offer up to you any outside the box thinking concerning we're all locked in on Four Corner schools to the Big 12, Washington, Oregon to the Big 10. If they get turned down, the Big 12. I don't know if we don't have some other options out there for the Big 10. I don't know how they view the Arizona schools, for example. It's great recruiting footprint. It gives opponents to USC and UCLA that are closer, actually, I believe. I might be wrong, but I believe closer than even Cal and Stanford. Gives them opponents, gives them another nice TV market, like a top 15 to 20 TV market in Phoenix. And again, Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, etc., draw in other parts of the country because they have alumni all over the place that have gone south, gone west. So I got to think Arizona is full of Big Ten alumni. All right. Oh, Larry, got to hit this super chat. Thank you so much for that, Larry. Then we'll take our call here. Larry says Utah's president completely shutting down Utah to the Big 12 tells you they have knowledge and have made smart moves previously. Yes. So the Arizona State presidents are open-ended, open-mouthed to the media. The Utah president, you don't hear anything out of him. I believe it's a him, he or she. Yes, and we have seen Utah make stepping stone type moves and significant moves, upgrading its status as a athletic program and football power from the WAC to the Mountain West to the Pac-12 a decade ago. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. We got Chris on the line.
Hi, Mark.
How are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
I'm good. What's up?
I don't know if you remember, last time we talked, I think I got disconnected, which was okay. I think you went ahead and answered my question anyway, but did you, in the meantime, I thought I sent you a proposal, I guess, for possible realignment. Did you have a chance to look at that?
I did not, sir.
Oh, you didn't?
What are the highlights?
Oh, I won't go into too much detail. It's stuff I probably already brought up before, but and you mentioned part of it was what I was hoping might happen actually was schools that are part of the Big Ten, that the ones that I think maybe are more appropriately belong maybe in the Big East would be like Rutgers, Pittsburgh, and Maryland.
Okay. I'm sorry, Chris. Let me ask one question before you continue. Are you speaking in fantasy land, or is this something that you believe is reasonable, possible?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I guess it might depend on what you mean by that, but
well,
yeah.
Is it realistic? Are there powers in play that can make these moves happen?
I don't know. I mean, that part I don't know.
I think I can answer the question for you, because going back to our previous conversation, you were making a Big East conference out of thin air, and there's nobody who's going to lead that charge to.
Well, I don't know that I'm creating it. Connecticut's part of the Big East, so I don't know if that's a fair criticism or not. I mean, they're part of the Big East, so I mean, if you want to say creating it out of thin air, I mean, then you're saying that Connecticut is in the Big East.
They're a football independent.
In the Big East. They're in the Big East. I mean, whether you want to admit it or not, that's where they are, but that's fine. I mean, okay.
Look up college football standings.
No, I know what you're telling me. I'm just, yeah, I guess maybe I'm creating it out of thin air, if that's what you want to, if that's the question.
We can talk about fantasy land and things that are never going to happen. That's fine. I just want to make sure of whether we're talking about what you believe moves could be made, with people and powers that be that are actually reality, or if we're just making stuff up. Okay, go right ahead. This is the setup that you would like to see.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. Army, Army, which I get independent to put them in there. I think West Virginia, Marshall, Connecticut, obviously. I think I wanted to put Louisville and Boston College there. I mean, the reason why they're a little bit outside the Atlantic coast. I mean, they're not outside, obviously, but I mean, a little bit, they would be maybe a little bit better fit, I think. And then Cincinnati, I think what I would put there. So I don't know if that got us to 12 yet, but and then Notre Dame, obviously. So, I mean, yeah, I'm creating a conference out of thin air, but out of, I think teams that are better suited, I think, to that side of the, that region. Did that add up to 12? I don't
completely follow you, Chris. I've done the same thing. I've posted videos and say, if I was the commissioner of college football, this is what I would do. And I built a Big East conference as well. So I'm not suggesting in any way that we can't have this conversation. I was just trying to distinguish the difference between saying we're dealing with the current situation and the reality of what's going on versus just playing fantasy land and making stuff up.
Well, I mean, I don't know how to answer that question without, if you want to call it fantasy land, I guess you can. I mean, it's something I think would make a good, if we could do it, which obviously it would take some effort, I guess. Probably some of those schools, you'd have to find out if they even were interested in moving, but they might not be. And I don't know, it's hard to know for sure if they'd even get a better deal like the two I told you from the Atlantic coast, I don't know how these rights are established and how they're, so it's like you'd have to find out whether they'd even get a better deal if they left, I guess, sort of thing. And then with
the Big Ten schools, who did you have? Rutgers and who?
Well, okay, that's the other side of it. I'm trying to get everybody up to 12. I mean, that's part of it. So it was Rutgers, Maryland, and Penn State were the three.
So automatically, right there, they're not making as much money leaving the Big Ten to
probably
do anything. So,
I understand that. I mean, yeah, that's probably a fair criticism.
You're doing what you believe is the best for college football.
Yeah, for I don't know if it'd be best for the Big Ten. I mean, you can make that a point that might not be, or for those schools, but I think it might be better for everybody collectively, I guess. But anyway, then to replace, then I haven't finished yet. Can I finish it?
Sure.
Okay. Indiana to the Missouri Valley. Do you like that idea?
You've made up a new conference.
No.
A new power conference.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Missouri Valley Conference.
Okay. Indiana to the Missouri Valley Conference. Sure. Yeah, I'm making a new conference out of what's already there. Obviously, they have 11 schools, so I'm adding one. And then to the Big Ten, I'm going to I'm not really doing it. Colorado and Missouri to the Big Ten. That gets them up to 12 again. And then UCLA, obviously UCLA and USC would stay in the Pac-12. I'm not taking them from the Pac-12. I'm letting them stay where they are. Oh, and then I'm going to replace Colorado with Brigham Young in the Pac-12.
Is there a Missouri Valley Football Conference? Does that exist?
Yeah. They have 11 schools.
The only thing I see here is a basketball conference.
No, I already looked into it, Mark. There's 11 schools in it. I know.
And they all play football.
Yeah.
So you're moving
Indiana
University, who currently plays in the Big Ten, to the Missouri Valley Conference to match football programs with Albany, Maine, Binghamton, Maryland, Baltimore, whoever that is, Bryant, New Hampshire, etc.
Well, you must be looking at the wrong. I'm talking about North Dakota State, South Dakota.
Okay. I Googled Missouri Valley Conference and it didn't come up. My bad. Yeah.
You're good.
No, that's not the Missouri Valley Conference. Yeah, that's the America East. Okay, here we go. Okay. Well, the one thing that doesn't work, well, there's a zillion things that don't work, but the main one is you're mixing high levels of football and low levels of football, like extreme levels of football.
Sure. Well, it's just like I said, like you say, spitballing. That's basically all I'm doing is spitballing. Yeah. But sometimes when you spitball, sometimes you might find something that actually makes sense, and I think this one sort of makes sense. I don't know if you agree with me or not. Like I said, I wouldn't move UCLA or USC. I'd keep them in the Pac-12. I'm relocating Colorado.
But for example, these Missouri Valley Conference football teams, are they going to play out of conference games against the likes of the SEC and the Big Ten?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I mean, North Dakota State's already scheduling games outside, but
Sure,
yeah,
they
I don't.
are.
Well, I mean, that part I don't. I mean, yeah, I'm bringing them up. I guess I'm bringing up an entire conference to division FBS.
Yeah.
So whatever goes along.
That's a major issue right there.
Well, you can find fault with everything I say, I guess, but
Well, it would be like saying next season we're going to have Rutgers play in the AFC North.
No, well, I moved them to the Big East, but whatever.
Well, I understand, but it would be like saying Rutgers is now playing in the AFC North in the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
There would be a problem with that. The problem would be people's student athletes' ability to compete and be in danger of getting injured and all of that.
I don't know though, Mark. I mean, I like what you have to say a lot of the times, but sometimes I think you contradict yourself sometimes. I mean, it's
how do I contradict myself?
All right. I don't make this is your show, and it's not really my place to throw stones.
Sure. You just said sometimes I contradict myself. How do I contradict myself? I've never contradicted myself on the point that low FCS schools cannot compete with the best teams in the Power Five. I've never contradicted myself there.
Well, all I'm really doing, if you want to get, I'm just bringing up to the FBS level a conference that's actually pretty darn good. So if you want to say it's a bad idea, that's fine. But I'm not really doing anything that might not happen eventually anyway. It's the best conference, arguably, in FCS, and it's like, I don't know. I guess if you want to make the argument that none of the teams in the conference are any good, I guess you can try. But we had to go.
Not any good. They're not any good in comparison to the teams that they're going to have to play.
Well, you can make that point, I guess. I mean, it might be a legitimate point. I'm not going to say it's not, but anyway, what it does, if it were to be done, it would bring up the total, because after everybody's where they're supposed to be, I haven't really gone through the whole thing yet, but that's okay. I'll just let it be for now. But after you have everyone where they're supposed to be, that's 12 conference. That's actually 12 conferences of 12 teams, so it's 144. So it brings in an additional, I think, 12 schools, maybe, or 11. No, I think 12. Maybe it is 11. But regardless, it brings it up to, instead of 134 or whatever it is, it's because they're going to add a couple more. The Jacksonville State, I think, and Sam Houston State.
Yes.
They're being added to the Conference USA, so it's going to bring up the total to like 134, I think, or 133. So I'm just adding another 11. So I'm bringing it up to 144. That's all I'm doing.
Yeah, and so from that standpoint, I get your point, but those schools are not competing in the same conference as, like, we're not taking Sunbelt schools and having them play in the SEC.
No. Well, that's not what I was trying to do. Is that what I was trying to do? I'm sorry if I made it sound like that.
No. Well, you are taking Indiana and playing them in the.
Yeah, I'm putting Indiana in the Missouri Valley, so you should throw the criticism that way, I guess, is whether if Indiana would even want to be there. But that's how I
know that they wouldn't.
Oh, okay.
They would probably have to.
That's the point I'm not sure about, because they get rolled over in football, and I was kind of wondering, well, if they're in maybe a lower tier, because it is lower tier, maybe that can do real well there. Maybe that's where they'd like to be. That's the part I think you're not maybe giving some consideration to. They might actually want to go there. Who knows? I'm not saying they would. I'm not saying I would if I was there either, but they might.
Well, I'm not going to get into that because I think it's pretty obvious that Indiana wants to play big time athletics, because that's.
Can I tell you these schools? Because there's 3 more schools I was going to put in Conference USA because they're up to 9. So you have to get them up to 12. Can I tell you those 3?
Sure.
Okay, be Massachusetts. Coastal Carolina, I think, would be better in the Conference USA. So I'm giving them a pretty good school, and Temple. So I'm putting 3. Middle of the road, I don't think Massachusetts isn't very good, but Temple isn't too bad. And then Coastal Carolina is actually pretty good. So and then that brings up CUSUA to about where they were before. And so, like I said, if it were to be done, it would give everybody 12 schools roughly, because Massachusetts isn't very close to CUSA, but roughly in the same geographical area. And that's kind of what I was trying to do. That was the objective, was to try to make it somewhat geographical.
So the only chance of this ever happening in any way, shape, or form, and I don't see it happening to the degree that you're proposing it, would be for there to be nationalization of the sport is what has to happen.
Well, there was one last thing I was going to tell you. Is it okay if I do before you let me go? Okay, in the
Absolutely.
Big 12, because West Virginia, because I'm taking them out, right? So that brings them down to 9. We have to add 3 to get to 12, right? So I was going to add Arkansas, Houston, and Southern Methodist to the Big 12.
Okay.
Okay. Well, there you go. That's it. That's how I did it. It was like to try to keep geographical, and then the other ones that already have 12, like the Mountain West and the MAC, I just leave them alone.
Well, I got to say, Chris, that the one thing that you're doing is you are being consistent geographically, and I think most college football fans would like that.
Okay.
I believe we all are a bit annoyed and concerned with the fabric of the sport, meaning the regionalization being torn to shreds.
Thank you.
Sure.
If you have a chance, Mark, you might want to just check it out, because I did.
I will.
You could throw criticism. I don't mind the criticism. I just thought you might want to look at it and see what you thought. That's all. I just throw spitballing. That's all I'm doing.
Absolutely. That's good stuff.
Have a good day, Mark.
We are open to everyone's thoughts. Thanks, Chris. Have a good one.
Thanks for letting me shed my ideas.
For
Bye.
sure. It's our guy, Chris, who is, he majors on proficiency ratings and now conference realignment, which I think he gives the FCS a bit too much credit in terms of competing with FBS schools or Power 5 schools, but he's uniform. He's got 12 times 12. He's got 144 teams. Everybody's got the same number of teams in the conference. That would be good. Geographically, it would be sound. We bring all the rivalries back together for the most part in regards to, although Indiana's playing in the Missouri Valley Conference. But anyway, we know what the reality is, though. The SEC's scarfing up schools in the Big 10, and the Big 12 is trying to hang in there and take its share from the Pac-12, and the Pac-12 is trying to survive, and the ACC's hoping that 2036 never gets here. That's kind of sums it up in one or two sentences. Arturo, thank you so much for the Super Chat contribution. Appreciate that. Will the Big 12's new conference-wide pro day attract top remaining G5 schools and possibly some ACC schools to join the conference, at least for the time being that the SEC and the Big Ten don't have one? Conference-wide pro day. Is there something I'm missing here? The Big 12 has a new conference-wide pro day, meaning in conjunction with the NFL Combine, like when individual schools have pro day. Is that what I'm hearing? So, Arturo, you don't have to send me another super chat, but if you can write maybe in caps in your next comment, is that what we're talking about when you say pro day, conference-wide pro day? I think a pro day is being each school's supplement to the NFL Combine. All right.
Eddie, come here.
Got our buddy Larry joining us here at the Voice of College Football. Hey, man.
Hey, Mark, how are you?
I'm good. What are you up to?
Hey, oh, not much. Just got off the golf course.
Nice. How'd you shoot today?
Oh, not good. I shot bogey golf. I shot a 90.
Okay.
So,
well, it's better than most.
Yep. Sorry, let me get my Eddie. Can you? So I've got a few things I need to cover. So as I put in the super chat, Utah president came out and said that they weren't going to go to the Big 12. And so can you call him in? And I'm so sorry, Mark.
You're good.
And so I was just thinking that Oregon and Washington kind of have leverage in the conference, and I think Arizona and Colorado are using a power play of the Big 12 to keep them at bay from asking for unequal revenue sharing, because the Four Corners have just as much capability as collapsing the conference as Oregon and Washington. So I think there's a little bit of power play there, because Arizona and Colorado have kind of been the bottom dwellers of the Pac-12 for years. So that's from a business standpoint. That's what I think's going on. And then also, we keep hearing these numbers, but yet nobody knows what the Amazon number is. So I'm not sure how we know it's 22 or 35. How would you know? Because nobody's going to have an idea of what a streamer is willing to pay. So your thoughts?
Well, and that might be the reason why the Arizona president actually said that it might come out to be a better deal than the Big 12. Maybe that's his thought. I don't know what, and this would be a bad comparison, but it's the first live sports comparison we have with Amazon. And of course, that's the NFL on Thursday nights and whatever kind of rating they get. I haven't looked into that. I know that the NFL took a hit, but they're looking past one season to the future, and that's why they went to Amazon. But they took a hit in regards to number. I don't know if they took a hit in terms of money. They took a hit in terms of viewers. So I don't know. We would have to look at that NFL figure and then take a tenth of it. I don't know what if there would only be one game per week. That would be the other consideration there.
Now, I wanted to also point. I picked it up off of a Pac-12 podcast, and I didn't know this until a few days ago. But of the games that were aired of the Pac-12, 37 games were aired on Pac-12, and 43 were aired on ESPN, ABC, basically your cable, whatever.
Yeah, Fox.
So
yeah.
On Fox. So when people are like saying, it's going to be a half streaming deal, it's kind of crazy that a lot of Pac-12 fans, if they don't have DirecTV, will actually have better access to the Pac-12 football games if it's on Amazon than if they literally wanted to watch it on Pac-12. So my point there is, if almost half the games were on Pac-12 network, which nobody's watching, what's the difference other than there's more money?
You said 37 games?
37 were on Pac-12 network, and then the other 43 were on traditional. That's so quite a bit.
Yeah, they're showing somewhere between a double header and a triple header every week.
Right. And so I made the prediction last week, and I said, because they're only going to have 5 games a week when they're not in a bye week. They're only going to have 4 games when they're in a bye week. There's going to be 8 teams playing during a bye week. So you've got 4 games. If you get 2, I believe they're going to be 2 games on ESPN every week. That covers at least 50%. And from what I'm hearing, ABC and Fox may want some of the bigger games, the Oregon, Washington, Utah games that draw the numbers. Now, I don't know if that's through ESPN that's going to get farmed out, but I hear a lot of talk and nobody really knows, and it's just speculation. And
it certainly is speculation. But like you say, if we look at this, and are we not going to include SMU and San Diego State to make it a 10-team or a 12-team league?
Yeah, then they would have 6, and then you would be on streaming. But we all know SMU and San Diego State's going to get pretty much put on streaming for most of that. So here's the other thing. If you go to the Big 12, and I've heard comments about USC and UCLA going to the Big 10, you only have so many time slots. So teams like Rutgers or Northwestern are getting put more on the back burner because you have more premium content coming on. So, with the Big 12, what happens, say Utah, Colorado, Arizona State come in, who's going to get pushed to the back? So
if I can remember correctly from seeing a chart that somebody put together, I think our buddy Tony did. He did it as well, but I saw it somewhere else that they basically mapped out the time blocks for all the networks in terms of their college football contracts for a Saturday. And the Pac 12 shut out, except for they could get a really, which I would suggest, and I think most people would, really go hard at trying to secure that late night spot on ESPN. That's what they should try to secure more than anything.
Right,
Is have a
because
10:30 game on ESPN.
yeah, nobody out east in the Eastern time zone, or you could even say Central, is going to try to find a Pac-12 game on when their team's playing or there's another matchup in their conference. They're not going to go look for Pac-12. So, visibility is not a big issue because who's going to turn on a Pac-12 game over a regional game that has to do with them? So the visibility, like you say, has to be late night. That's where their value is. I think they know it. And that's where I think they're going to get their money. And ESPN knows it. And they said, what is it? It averages 1 million. Some nights are lower, some are better for the late slot Saturday games. They average 1 million.
Sounds right.
So that can bring in some revenue. I'm not sure how much revenue 1 million viewers brings in.
I think you hit on a huge key in this in regards to the marquee games in the Pac 12, because while the depth of the schedule wanes and drags the conference down, I'm not talking from a football standpoint, I'm talking from a rating standpoint. Those marquee games are still extremely lucrative and valuable events. Those, we could all name the games. There's about 5 of them. With USC and UCLA leaving, it dwindles, but there's still those games rate. I've got a favorite website that outlines every game and what the TV rating and the viewership is. And when you put Oregon and Utah or Oregon and Washington on the same field, it's still a really good draw as long as it's got a decent time slot.
Right. Okay. Well, I just wanted to point out a few of those things that I had in my mind. So
good stuff, Larry.
All right. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks for the contribution, man.
You bet.
Appreciate you being here. Thanks.
Bye.
It's our guy, Larry, chiming in. Very knowledgeable about Utah football in particular, the Pac-12 as well. So we'll continue to talk realignment, expansion, all of that. My last point was going to be, again, you can almost fill in the blanks. Go as crazy as your mind can think. Maybe not as crazy as Chris in regards to kind of realigning the entire sport and making up conferences, but that's a different deal. But in terms of the way things are currently headed, again, we think too much geography. I don't know if the SEC could go out to the West Coast, Arizona State. The Big Ten obviously has AAU considerations, which I believe would take into account Arizona. I just think it's fascinating the way the dominoes line up and will most likely fall. There's Pac-12 contract deal, and then there's the evaluation of that deal by Utah, Colorado, Arizona State, Washington, and Oregon to say, oh, okay, that hits our mark, or it's slightly less, but we can work with that, or whatever it is. They're going to have a response to that deal being struck. So I would think before anything happens, this deal has to be struck. I don't think that if there's not a deal in a month, even though they're talking about a few weeks right now, that can always extend to a month or 6 weeks. When you hear from anybody in this complicated of a situation with this much on the line, when you hear we should have a deal in a couple weeks, that may be true, but don't be surprised if it's 4 weeks, 6 weeks, if it doesn't drag on further. So that being the case, again, that should be the first domino. I don't think that Arizona and Arizona State are going to say, oh, we waited too long and the Pac-12 needs to get its act together. And they didn't present a deal. They're not getting this done. We're leaving. No, they're going to wait to see what the number is going to be. So that has to come in first. Now, in the meantime, if this really drags, so we're looking at what? March, well, it's St. Patty's Day, March 17th. Happy St. Patrick's Day to everyone out there. So, didn't wear my green because I don't wear green. I do wear a lot of black. I don't believe I have any green in my wardrobe. Okay, but anyway, no one cares about that. So, a lot of black, a lot of gray. So the Pac-12 media deal. So the Big Ten, wouldn't it be something if the Big Ten named a commissioner before the Pac, because it's already, again, March 17th. So in April, we know that Kevin Warren is moving on to the Chicago Bears. The Big Ten should be in the midst of interviewing candidates right now. I've not heard anything more about that. They can do that in ways in which that doesn't get leaked out to the media too much. But I've not picked up on anything. Has anyone picked up on any, not what somebody, some college football writer listed as his candidates, but I'm talking about that there are findings out there that we know that so-and-so has met with the Big Ten. Okay. That aside, the Big Ten is going to be without a commissioner in April. So, of course, they don't want to leave that position open for long. So, we're 13 days removed from April. So, there's a possibility. It's a possibility. I don't think it's likely, but the Big Ten could have a commissioner before. Now, is the commissioner going to come in and in day 2 say, Oregon, Washington, we accept your application. You are now members of the Big Ten? I don't think that's going to happen. But there's going to be a Washington-Oregon response to that Pac-12 deal. And that response, they're not going to be jumping for joy. I highly doubt if Oregon and Washington are going to be jumping for joy and saying, whoa, it turned out to be 75 million. They're still going to rather be in the Big Ten. So we've got Bonehead saying that Brett Yormark will be the next Big Ten commissioner. So he'll fall right in line with Kevin Warren in being aggressive going after schools on the West Coast. So regardless of what that number is, we basically know that Washington and Oregon want to be in the Big Ten. They have been obvious about it. So there's not going to be any figure that comes back that is going to change. Now, it may improve their relationship, improve their situation, and improve the stability for them to say, okay, we're okay if we stay here. We will continue to choose the Pac-12 over the Big 12, but there's no number that's going to come back. Unless somebody's got a different argument for me, there is no number that's going to come back that is going to cause Oregon and Washington to say, you know what, we retract that application for membership to the Big Ten. We're good. That's not going to happen. But the Pac-12 can at least hope that the Big Ten doesn't accept Washington and Oregon, and that the Big 12 number and the Pac-12 number is at least comparable, so the Pac-12 members stay. Now, what Stanford and Cal are thinking, so we've got a read on everybody much better than Stanford and Cal. I've not heard anything out of Stanford and Cal. We know that from an academic standpoint, that Stanford is, of course, huge. They would be a huge addition to the Big Ten. I would think that the Big Ten would want to have Stanford. Now, whether they want to have them as a pair, as they did with USC and UCLA, that doesn't surprise me. Cal is an amazing institution, and the Big Ten, these are football programs that have been good, especially Stanford, of course. Now, nobody goes to the games, but if Michigan's traveling to Stanford and Ohio State, I remember an Ohio State game at Cal in 2013, and Cal had a horrible football team, even worse than they do now. I think they might have went 1-11 that year in 2013. Ohio State went out there and filled the stadium. Stadium was full. And it's not a large stadium, but it probably seats 60,000. And they probably averaged, I would guess, 28 to 30 to 32,000 at very minimal ticket prices for that season. But when Ohio State showed up, they filled the stadium. More Cal people went to the game, but more so even Ohio State alumni and Ohio State fans from the area showed up at the game or traveled. Now, when that becomes more of a common occurrence, you're not going to see this glut of Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan fans and other fan bases. Nebraska travel that far all the time. But especially if that school is not in their division, if we go to divisions or some type of, forget the divisions, we're probably not going to be in divisions in the Big Ten, but let's say we're in that scheduling format where you either play that particular school every year or you only play them once every other year or every 3 years. Then that trip, let's say for the Nebraska fan base to go to Stanford, only becomes a 1 in every 4 year opportunity. So then it becomes more attractive. I guess what I'm saying in putting all that together is I would not think that Stanford's lack of football attractiveness at the gate and Cal is going to be that much of a deterrent to the Big Ten. All right. Appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. We've got about 230 folks on the line. Appreciate you being here. John lets us know 76 likes. Let's go. That's an easy one. Even if you don't agree with me, we ask that you hit the like button. Also want to remind you that speaking of Amazon, so you know what probably the holdup is in all this. Why this didn't dawn on me before, because I'm waiting for this phone call to come in at any point. I think the big holdup in this is Amazon is contemplating, okay, how much can we devote to these Pac-12 games? I was going to say lousy Pac-12 games. Pac-12 games, but I will be more respectful than that. How much are we going to devote and set aside in our budget to these Pac-12 games when we are just anticipating, as we budget for the future, we're anticipating this just tremendous surge that every business analyst is predicting out there. This amazing surge in use of the Voice of College Football Amazon link that is going to cost us millions and millions and millions when everybody gets on board with that Amazon link. That's going to negate the Pac-12 deal with Amazon. I've got to think that this is what Amazon is contemplating right now. And so we might as well start right now in giving them an indication of how much of a factor that's going to be going forward. I find it amusing when I didn't say lousy, and then I said I was thinking lousy, and then I stated it. Understand, I got a pretty good filter, so obviously I wanted to say lousy. Yes, I wanted to, Connor. Yes, or otherwise I wouldn't have said it. I considered the Pac-12 to be arguably the third best conference in America last year. It's very entertaining. Loved it. Enjoyed it. I enjoyed the Oregon-Washington game. I enjoyed the Oregon-UCLA game. I enjoyed UCLA and Washington. That was on a Thursday night, especially if you can give me a good Thursday night game when I'm not torn by SEC games, Big Ten games, etc. Those were tremendous games in particular. The USC-UCLA game, watched all of that. Great game. Your beloved Oregon State Beavers. I watched the USC game. I saw what else did I see Oregon State play? I was disappointed by the bowl game, not by the score or not by who won, but just by it being a waste of time to watch because you were so immensely dominant in that game and weren't lousy. I, for some reason, I don't know who else was playing. I didn't see much of the Civil War. All right. Next up, we've left the link in the chat if you would like to call us. Next up, I did want to make mention that on Saturday, there was a spring game. It will be played in Columbia, Missouri. The Tigers are playing their spring game far ahead of anyone else, March 18th. And we've got actually a 5-person quarterback battle. We've got the incumbent, Brady Cook, who is out with a shoulder injury, so he's not participating this spring. We have Sam Horn, who's also out this spring, but got some playing time last year and is a tremendous athlete. He is the highest ranked, I believe he is the highest ranked Missouri signee ever at quarterback. Then you've got Jake Garcia, the former four-star quarterback who had a rough time with Miami last year. But new location, new coaching, new scenery. Maybe Jake Garcia makes a move for the job. And then we've got Jabari Johnson, who's not playing this spring because he's an incoming freshman, not an early enrollee. So we'll see him this summer, but he's a 4-star as well. And then you also have one Dylan Liable. So I knew about the other 4, but Dylan Liable is how you probably pronounce his name. He's a walk-on, but he apparently is vying for the job as well. So we've got a 5-man quarterback competition at Missouri, and Mizzou plays its spring game on Saturday. And you get all this here, the voice of college football. Bam. All right. We really kick it into gear on April 1st with a Michigan watch party for the Michigan spring game. Now, the good news there is that is going to be available to you for all of us to be watching that together, even though we're going to do it on Patreon. So it's going to be closed in terms of being able to watch it on YouTube. We want to get you a taste of what we've got going over on Patreon. So the Michigan Watch Party, we're going to provide the link here at the main channel and over on the Michigan channel, and probably on every channel we have. We will throw you the link and you will be able to access that and watch the Michigan spring game with us. Then I think I'll switch over to the Michigan channel after the game and take calls and comments. All right. Next up, I would like to go into some thoughts about Power 5 schedules that we've talked about many times here. Check out the videos. I've made my suggestions, but I haven't gone to this. I've made this point numerous times going back 10 years because I never understood, except for uniformity. And there is something to be said about uniformity. So I have understood why the SEC and the ACC have their designated rivals in the other division. So you know the deal. In the SEC currently, there are 2 7-team divisions. You play everyone in your division. You play a set rival in the other division. If you're Alabama, you play Tennessee. You play them every year. And then the other 6 rotate. So the issue is not everyone has the same number of rivals. Not everyone has a rival in the other division. So some of those make sense. Some of those matchups, Alabama, Tennessee, LSU, Florida, Auburn, Georgia. That's it in the SEC. The other matchups don't make sense. They don't need to be played every year. In the ACC, Miami, Florida State makes total sense. Of course, that game has to be played. UNC and NC State, North Carolina State has to be played. Got to play that one. Clemson, Georgia Tech. That may not be at the top of your list of rivalries, but it is a long-standing ACC rivalry that even predates the ACC. Clemson, Georgia Tech, set rivals. I don't know that there are any other ones that really make sense and have to be played. Pitt Syracuse, that's a nice rivalry. That's a regional rivalry, and it goes back to the old Big East days, so I'm good with that. But the other ones don't make any sense. So why are conferences like the ACC, which has already unveiled its new scheduling format, which is starting this season, that is a 3-6-6 model. Is that right? Or 3-5-5 with 14 teams, 3-5-5 model. So you play 3 permanent opponents, 3 set opponents each year, and then you split the rest of the conference and you play one group, one season, the next group, the next season, then you go back to the first group. Okay, what I don't like about this is that that's an improvement over what we've got. Absolutely. It's almost like the college football playoff was an improvement over the BCS system and the BCS championship game only having 2 teams. It was an obvious improvement because we now had 4 teams that had earned a playoff spot. However, it still wasn't a good system. So this is the same deal. It's an improvement, but it could be better. Why do you need? So right now, we know what the ACC is doing. It's announced. The SEC is working on its schedule, which will most likely be announced around the SEC meetings that take place in Destin at the end of May. That's kind of the target. For the Big Ten, we don't know. Could come out tomorrow. It could be sometime this summer because it's not until 2024, of course, that the SEC and the Big Ten take in the 2 new teams in each conference and have to go forward with the new format. Why do you have to have the same number of designated opponents / rivals for each team when each school has a different number of rivals? Just protect those games, period. And yes, it makes the scheduling of the rest of the games a little more complicated, but it's still somewhat regimented. For example, we'll take the Big Ten. Ohio State. Who do they have to play every year? Michigan. In my eyes, that's it. Michigan. They have to play Michigan every year. Some people would argue Penn State. And I don't know who else you would argue. The really old fans that care about the Illibuck, the Turtle Award, would say Illinois, but that game ceased to be an every year game in 2003, 20 years ago. So no. For Ohio State, it's just Michigan. For Michigan, it's Ohio State and Michigan State. Again, in my eyes, we could bring back, oh man, I'm blanking out. Because the axe is Wisconsin, Minnesota. What is the Minnesota-Michigan rivalry? What's the not the Old Oak and Bucket? That's Indiana, Purdue. Help me out, Michigan fans. I can't believe I'm blanking on the Minnesota-Michigan rivalry trophy. Anyway, the Little Brown Jug. Duh, the Little Brown Jug. Thank you. The Cal fan got that, Alex. Thank you. That's embarrassing. The Little Brown Jug that's got the jug and it's got the score of each game going back forever. Good Lord. And Jason let us know that there's a big hockey game between the Gophers and the Wolverines on Saturday. Okay. So I'm open to either going one of 2 directions there, that either that has to be played every year or it doesn't. It's not being played every year now, but I've got no issue with if Michigan and Minnesota agree, hey, we got to play fine. Then Michigan's 3 set opponents are Ohio State, Michigan State, and Minnesota. Or it's just Ohio State. Antoine could let us know. Antoine's a fervent Michigan fan who we appreciate always being here. Good to see Antoine here. Shows up at all of our Wolverine live shows every Wednesday, 5 p.m. Eastern time. So it doesn't have to be the same number of teams for everyone. Nebraska really, in a sense, doesn't have a rivalry in the conference. But Iowa's become a rival. They were a rival in a sense, as a bordering state, even before Nebraska joined the Big Ten. But they certainly are one, and they certainly have been pushed by the Big Ten playing on Black Friday every year. So Nebraska, Iowa. But Iowa's got, I would argue, Nebraska, Minnesota, and probably Wisconsin. We probably want to play that game every year. Wisconsin, Iowa. So Iowa's set. They're locked in with 3. But you don't have to come up with 3 for everyone. Rutgers, we can continue to push Rutgers and Maryland together as a rival, but that's not necessary. So my point is, it doesn't have to be the same for every team. Same thing in the SEC. The ACC's already announced its format. We already know what their permanent opponents are. That's fine. All right. So that's my scheduling note right there. As always, leave your comments below. All right. Then moving on to, I saw an article by Matt Hayes, so I want to give credit where credit's due, although who hasn't sized this up in the past? Not just between the Big Ten and the SEC, but those are the 2 conferences that he focused on as having, similar to basketball, with the SEC and the Big 12, with the ACC and the Big 10, having a week where we have nothing but Big 10 and SEC opponents against each other and have the entire league play against each other. Okay. The only downfall I see to this is that the Big Ten plays a 9-game schedule. The SEC most likely will go to a 9-game conference schedule. If you are Florida and you already play Florida State non-conference and you're not letting go of that game has to be played. And now, sure, Florida sometimes adds a Utah. They add a Utah. And Georgia adds in Oregon like they did last year. So they play 2 difficult non-conference games, but they're currently doing that in the midst of a 4-game non-conference schedule. Going forward, only 3 games to play with. And if you've got to play a rival, plus then you're being given a Big Ten opponent, which could be a difficult game. I don't know if that's going to fly, but it's fun to look at. So here we go from bottom to top. And I tell you, detractors of the SEC, what you're going to find out here, if you're being honest with yourself, this is what you're going to find out. I hear more and more from SEC detractors that the SEC is top heavy. Well, the Big 12 is going to be the most balanced league in America. The Pac-12, during its better times in the last 10 to 20 years, aside from USC's dominance and then Stanford, Oregon, has been a pretty balanced league. But generally, you do have top-heavy leagues because there are only so many elite teams in America. And right now, what programs are elite? 4. Clemson's teetering. Oklahoma, we would have included them a couple years ago. They've fallen off. USC's got an opportunity to maintain and continue the upward trajectory. But we've got 4 for sure. And LSU's got an opportunity. Penn State's got an opportunity, but they're not there. My point about the SEC is SEC critics say that the league is not deep. This is going to show you, if you really consider the quality of these teams as we go through these matchups based on last season, and not just last season, projecting forward and also looking at the last 3 to 5 seasons, that the SEC is much deeper than the Big Ten. So your bottom matchup last season would have been Northwestern, who won 1 game, and that was in conference against Nebraska, who didn't win a game from September through November, won 1 game, lost to the likes of some MAC opponent, Miami of Ohio, and Western Illinois. Vandy was actually a pretty viable team. Now, we could have lifted Vandy to either 13th place or 12th place, but I kept them in last place because I just think that it's obvious that they've got the least amount of talent. But I went with the conference standings here, and we've got a three-way tie for last place in the SEC. So Northwestern, Vandy, who wins this game? I don't think it's not that Northwestern couldn't win the game because Vandy's no powerhouse, but Vandy was a much better team last season. They beat Florida. They beat Kentucky. Can you see Northwestern beating either one of those teams? No. They couldn't beat Miami of Ohio. So that is a layup for the SEC. Moving up a spot, we've got Rutgers taking on Texas A&M. And yes, I wouldn't put it past Texas A&M as failing at anything football related last season. You know, it just continued to be a debacle and a joke. And Jimbo Fisher, if he did not have the stability of a contract and the luxury of making more money than all of us put together times 50, that's what has kept his job. Because if the buyout was reasonable, he'd be gone. But Texas A&M would have way too much talent for Rutgers. So, you know, I always like to match these up and not just predict the winner of the game, but more so because a lot of them are difficult to make a call on just one game. Basically say who would win out of 10 games. I got Vandy winning 8 and Texas A&M probably winning 8 against Rutgers. Don't you think? Now we've got Indiana, who the previous season was winless in the Big Ten. And the reason you're seeing that these SEC records, overall records, are better than the Big Ten records, why do you think that is? It's twofold. So on the Big Ten side, it's that the Big Ten plays 9 conference games. So you're going to lose more games because you are having to play an additional conference game. So 14 teams all had to play 1 additional conference game. Therefore, you're going to have 7 additional losses, most likely, because that's taking the place of some layup, cupcake game. So to the Big Ten's credit and defense here, there are 7 more losses baked into these records. On the other hand, that doesn't account for all of it. The SEC played better out of conference and won more games and had a better winning percentage outside the conference. Therefore, the records, the overall records are going to be better. The records inside the conference obviously all add up to 500. So Auburn, Indiana, I go Auburn in this one like 7-3. Nebraska, Mizzou, again, another SEC team with a winning record, a team that went to a bowl game as Mizzou lost to Wake Forest. And Nebraska beat Iowa to finish 4-8, and Mizzou wins this game. I don't know. This would be a decent series, I think. But I got to go Mizzou like 6-4. Again, that's the leftovers from the Scott Frost era. That's not necessarily Matt Rule going forward. Again, this is just a little exercise here so we can play the 2022 version. And for teams like Nebraska, especially, the 23 version could be much different. Michigan State, Florida. It's a fun little matchup for 2 bad teams. That's also a rematch of the 1999 Citrus Bowl that Plaxico Burress had a field day and Michigan State won. In Nick Saban's last game, even though he didn't coach that game, that's when he took off for LSU. Now we finally get to some teams that actually can show up and play some decent football. Wisconsin, who won a bowl game against Oklahoma State, taking on a Kentucky team that lost to Iowa, as a interesting comparison there. So we've got the comparison of a Wisconsin-Iowa, in which you've got to say that Iowa was slightly better because they did win against Wisconsin by 2 touchdowns and had a better record by 1 game. And Kentucky lost to Wisconsin, or lost to Iowa by 3 touchdowns. So I'm going to go with the first Big Ten win being right there. Let's say Wisconsin wins that matchup 6 or 7 times out of 10. Of course, Will Levis did not play in that bowl game. We've got Maryland and Arkansas. I like this matchup. Maryland has won 2 consecutive bowl games against ACC teams, and Arkansas, of course, won that colossal shootout against Kansas in their bowl game. And so you got a nice little quarterback matchup with KJ Jefferson taking on Talia Tungavailoa. That's a fun one, and I think that's pretty much a split. I'll go with a split. If anyone wins the series, I would bet on Arkansas. Okay, here we go. Argraw is saying the bottom half of the SEC is trash and not beating the Big Ten. All you have to do is look at their trash bowl record. Okay. I think that's very short-sighted. And also considering that more teams from the SEC made bowl games because they won their out-of-conference games to reach a bowl game. Tim is letting us know that the Pac-12 is the second best conference in America. Don't quite believe that. I'm not saying that it's an unreasonable statement. I don't think it's a joke. Like, I'm not going to just talk him off the ledge, but Argraw, you're not convincing me 1 in 5. That's a good point. That's a point to be considered. That the SEC, so the bad teams in the SEC, so Florida lost a bowl game, Mizzou lost a bowl game, South Carolina played Notre Dame. So nobody in the SEC, nobody in the Big Ten at the level of South Carolina was playing anybody close to a Notre Dame. So what other games? Ole Miss lost to Texas Tech. Mississippi State won. So I don't know how high you're going up this ladder. But anyway, I get your point. You're going by bowl games exclusively, even though South Carolina beat Clemson. They were good enough to beat Clemson, the ACC champion outside the conference. And Ole Miss beat Georgia Tech by 6 touchdowns. And Arkansas beat BYU outside the conference and Cincinnati. All right. And the likes of Indiana's not doing that. You know, they're losing to Cincinnati by 4 touchdowns. All right. Our next game would be, yes, Maryland to Arkansas. Then we got Illinois, South Carolina. So Illinois, to their credit, they could have won a bowl game against Mississippi State. They went to the wire. They lost on a last-second field goal. So forget the final score. There was one of those fluke, you got to throw the ball over your head and 18 laterals, and it turned into a touchdown for Mississippi State. So Illinois took Mississippi State to the wire. They got to play South Carolina. This would be one of the best games, one of the best matchups based on 2022. I believe South Carolina is going to be better going forward, at least this next season. Illinois loses a ton, and South Carolina doesn't really lose much. So South Carolina is going to be better than Illinois this fall. But if we're going 2022, that to me is a toss-up. We've got Minnesota and Ole Miss. Interesting. Minnesota had all sorts of issues throwing the ball. Ole Miss got off to a great start. They were 7-0. They took Alabama to the wire, 27-24, and they unraveled. So I'm going to put some faith in PJ Fleck in Minnesota to pull out this series like 6-4. But that's a good game. That's a good matchup. We're all going to have good matchups from here on out. Iowa, Mississippi State. Again, Mississippi State beat Illinois. Iowa beat Kentucky. I tend to like Iowa in this matchup slightly. I'll go with the defense and the special teams, and I'll take Iowa 6-4. But it's probably going to be more in the 5-5 range. But I don't want to bail out on all these matchups and just say 5-5, because the last 3 look like 5-5 matchups. But I want to call a winner, and so I would move toward Iowa in that one. Something tells me this matchup looks familiar. Yeah, I don't think we want to comment on that one. That was a massacre. Unfortunately, we can't really evaluate the game because Purdue, well, LSU was missing all sorts of players too. The Purdue misses were more publicized and more high profile, meaning Payne Durham at tight end, Charlie Jones at wide receiver, and of course, Aiden O'Connell. So, but LSU, my goodness, just wiped them off the face of the earth. LSU wins this game 7 or 8 times out of 10. And then let's move on to Penn State and Alabama. Well, Bryce Young, Will Anderson, we're talking about a motivated, focused Alabama team, and they showed up in their bowl game and really laid the hammer to Kansas State. So I like Alabama in this series, but that would be entertaining football. They play 10 times, Alabama wins 6, maybe 7. I don't want to discount Penn State. Don't know that that team from last year, based on their performances against Ohio State and Michigan, were quite ready for prime time, though. Now we get down to our final 2, and I'm going by seedings here. Tennessee beat Alabama. Ohio State, Tennessee. What do we put the over-under at? Probably 100. And you got to think, based on Ohio State's performance against Georgia, if they've got their heads screwed on, they're better than Tennessee, and they win that game. What, 6, 7 times? And then finally, we've got Michigan taking on an NFL team. So shut it down, forget it. I don't know how many times Michigan wins this game. Obviously, the Georgia team we saw in the national championship game did not show up every week. So if this is played 10 times, I guess I go Georgia 8. We know what happened the year before. Michigan Rick is giving the Wolverines, I guess, 1 game against Georgia. So I gave Michigan a little bit more credit than that. Exploring with Ben's here, telling everyone to please smash the like button. We appreciate that. Thanks for being here. All right. David, national championships per conference. The Big Ten has what? National championships per conference. Oh. David is talking about all sports, which, of course, we don't talk about all sports here. So I was wondering, what in the world am I looking at? Okay. The Big Ten courtesy. So these were not won as Big Ten members, of course. Courtesy USC, UCLA. That bolsters that. Yes. As Tim is letting us know, USC and UCLA bring 225 with them. So that knocks the Big Ten down to 292. I think John is looking at 3 wins for Michigan against Georgia. It is certainly possible. Folks, we would like to let you all know that we've got some merch that we are very happy about, very proud of. There it is, here at the Voice of College Football. So check it out. I will drop the link in the chat, but you can just go to thevoiceofcollegefootball.com, thevoiceofcollegefootball.com, and you can find the merch right there. Thanks for posting that, Ben. Ben has dropped the link. Thank you, sir. And speaking of Notre Dame and their South Carolina game, as we did a few minutes ago, we got Will on the line. Will, what's going on?
Hey, Mark, I'm recovering from my school losing in the NCAA tournament, and I think talking college football will be a bit of therapy for that.
Notre Dame made the NCAA tournament?
Well, I go to Virginia Commonwealth.
Oh, VCU.
Yeah.
Who did they lose to?
St. Mary's.
That's
So
right.
at,
You
le-
go
at
to
least we lost.
VCU.
At least we lost to a Catholic school. But,
And you
yeah.
lost to a higher seed, right?
Yeah, we were at 12, but I was hopeful we would win. But
Okay.
our point guard and conference player of the year got hurt, and it fell apart and unraveled after that. It was a very close game up until that point.
Okay. Well, yeah, that's the downside to the NCAA tournament. Those games are quick. It can happen like that.
Yeah. So I still think you're giving Texas A&M too much credit against Rutgers. That was the one that really bothered me. How you
Okay.
gave them 8. I mean, you saw what that Texas A&M team looked against UMass. Like, I don't think they can consistently put out that LSU performance 8 out of 10 times. I'll give them 6. I'll give them 6, but I was so
Yeah,
surprised to
I
say 8.
just don't even think that those two rosters are comparable. And I know that
Yeah.
that doesn't mean everything because Texas A&M didn't play up to it. But man, Rutgers couldn't score against anyone.
Yeah, but I mean, we saw that even Mississippi State, like, they weren't comparable talent-wise, and the Fighting Mike Leaches blew them out.
Well, yeah, but Texas A&M getting blown out last year and Rutgers getting blown out are two different things. Let's look at Rutgers scores last year. Rutgers lost to Iowa 27-10. They lost to Ohio State 49-10. They lost to Nebraska 14-13. They beat Indiana 24-17. They lost to Minnesota 31-0. They lost to Michigan 62-17. They lost to Michigan State 27-21. There's a decent performance there. They lost to Penn State 55-10. They lost to Maryland 37-0.
I mean, those are ugly scores, but
yeah, Texas A&M didn't play any ugly scores. You know, they're like, if you look at Texas A&M, then if they were Rutgers, then they wouldn't be like throwing the ball in the end zone to win the game at Alabama. Like, you know, just their ability to compete against top level teams is just so different.
yeah, but I don't know. I just feel like they play consistently, like, down to their competition. So I feel like it would be at least be competitive.
Yeah, they did lose to Mississippi State by 18, but if you want to consider that a blowout, that's not a blowout for Rutgers. That's a blowout for Texas A&M. For Rutgers, that would be a really good performance. They lost to Mississippi State on the road by 18. I watched some of that game. It was kind of a slow burn 18. It wasn't, you know, they were within reach. They lose to Alabama again, 24-20. They lose to South Carolina 30-24. They lose to Ole Miss 31-28. They lose to Florida. Okay. They got beat down a little bit there, 41-24. I don't remember the details of that game. And they lose to Auburn 13-10 on a last-second field goal. So, you know, they're not losing by 37, 39, 45, etc.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I just, like, watching that A&M team, I just don't feel like that they would have been that dominant against Rutgers. But how different do you think it would be? Do you think it would be about the same if we added in the new members, Texas and Oklahoma and UCLA, USC? Do you think they're pretty comparable?
Yeah,
USC.
that's what I should have done.
Yeah.
Well, last season you would have put USC at number 3 or 4. Depending on how you weight the entire season. They had a better conference record than Penn State, but so yeah, 3 or 4 for USC, and then UCLA would have jumped in there pretty high. They finished 9-4. They might have been right behind, you know, they might have been 4 or 5, maybe 6. Minnesota's 9-4, however you want to rate that. They're somewhere in the top 5 or 6, and then, you know, Texas, they would have been like 7th or 8th. You know, they were 8-5. They lost 3 games in the conference. They were 6-3. Oklahoma, 6-7. They're down there with Florida and Mizzou playing who? Playing Nebraska, Indiana.
That would have been an entertaining game. Texas, Oklahoma. Oh wait, no, that wasn't entertaining at all. Never mind. I remember that game now. That Oklahoma
Not last
Nebraska
year.
game. Yeah, that was bad. But
Oh,
I
you're
felt like,
talking about Oklahoma, Nebraska?
yeah,
Yeah, the year before. Yeah. I thought you were talking Texas, Oklahoma.
yeah.
Yeah.
But I felt like maybe by the end of the year that game would have been more competitive.
Oh,
but,
I think so.
yeah. Mm-hmm. So, Mark, did you hear about the Notre Dame recruiting news
No.
with Braden Hellman? I'm still bummed about it.
Oh, well, I mentioned him on our Ohio State show the other day after he decommitted from Notre Dame, sure, and I think Michigan's in the running, right?
It'll be so disappointing to see him go from Notre Dame to Michigan, but I mean, I think it was something to do with a class. Like he was supposed to take another class to be able to get into Notre Dame, and then apparently he either failed it or just didn't take the class, and now he can't get into Notre Dame.
Okay.
It's just
Yeah,
frustrating.
I didn't know what the details were. The original reports just said personal reasons, so that
Yeah.
typically means something to do with family. But,
Yeah. I don't know. Like he was like probably one of my favorite recruits, and I don't know. It's another shot to the gut with Notre Dame recruiting that's out of Marcus Freeman's hands and Chad Bowden. He's the recruiting coordinator. He's done a terrific job. But
well, it's going to happen.
yeah.
Anything else, Will?
No, thanks for letting me call in, Mark. And
Absolutely, man.
Yeah, you dove in some more on Rutgers, but I don't know. Maybe you're right, but I don't know with that A&M team. Like,
well, that's why it's fun to talk about, and we'll
All right.
never know.
All right, I'll see you, Mark.
Okay, Will, have a good one.
You too. Bye-bye.
All right. Yes. Actually, the connection between Rutgers and Texas A&M is that Rutgers took Texas A&M's place in taking on Wake Forest and Sam Hartman at the Gator Bowl the season before 2 seasons ago in the COVID year. There you go. All right, we've got merch. We left the link. Ben did in the chat. Just give it a look. See what you see there. Give me some suggestions on stuff that you like, you don't like, something you would like to see, and let us know. And we are going to do our best in the future to possibly include some other more team-oriented items, but we would appreciate that you would look it over. And we had a good show tonight. Is there anything else we need to hit on? I wanted to hit on scheduling. I wanted to hit on my little Big Ten SEC challenge. And again, I want to give at least a shout out to Matt Hayes because he gave me not the idea, because I've done this for 10 years or more, but in regards to throwing it in my face today and thinking, okay, we'll give this a look. This time. And then, of course, realignment. And we will continue to focus on realignment. If there is some shred of evidence or a narrative there that we can reasonably take on. I'm not going to talk about realignment every day if I don't believe that there's something there to discuss. Connor says Mark has to show up in the reversible bucket hat next show. If that was my son instead of me, if you guys were fortunate enough to have my son as a host, now he would wear the bucket hat all day. He's all about the bucket hats. He's got a ton of them. He's good with that. I have never put a bucket hat on this head, ever. All right. Thunderstorm Duck says the realignment talk, it's boring. Speaking of which, if you hang on just a second, we'll get you excited with this. We'll get you just pumped up, amped up for this. So I'm always brainstorming about new and fresh content. Let's see here. So we've got, this is what I'm thinking about. Oh, you got it right there already. Okay, so we've got the likes of, in March. I was looking at hot seat rankings, and I came up with 9 coaches that I believe that are on the hot seat. So we will look at what they need to do to keep their jobs most likely. The ACC and the Pac-12, much talk about a possible merger there. I'll give that a look. Under the radar games, I've got my list of the top 10 under the radar games. Got to put that together. All-time program rankings. I went to exhaustive research, if you recall, last offseason to put together rankings for every team in the Power 5 on winning percentage, points in the AP poll, national championships, conference championships, NFL draft selections, first-round selections, Heisman Trophy winners, major award winners, major bowl wins, total bowl wins, all of that. And I will have to add on the 2022 numbers to bring that up to date. This year's 2023's TCU. And then, of course, my famous plus or minus 3, because I think that's a significant upgrade or downgrade to a particular football team to either increase the wins by 3 or decrease the wins by 3 from one season to another. And so we will look at that. I think we've got some prime candidates to do that. You can start with Colorado, 1-11 last year. You can go with Purdue, an 8-4 regular season team last year. Tough schedule, lost their quarterback, best wide receiver, best tight end. Could be difficult for Purdue with a tougher schedule and a new head coach, and so forth. April, spring games across the board, going crazy with spring games. We will be here every Saturday in April with watch parties and post, in quotes, game shows. Let's see, what do we have for May? We will then size everything up because we're going to get through, of course, spring practice and all the spring games in April. So May is the time to reset and say, okay, what is our still too early top 25? Conference power rankings, position rankings, player rankings, top 10 quarterbacks, top 10 wide receivers, etc. Transfer rankings, because, of course, we're going to have more departures through the transfer portal. What am I doing here? Miami, Florida State, Clemson. Oh, yeah. I'm very interested in this. Some of you not so much, but with the rumors of the likes of those schools possibly going to either the SEC or the Big Ten or the Big 12. And I sized that up. I think, no, I did not. I will add that as well. Yes. The likes of Washington, Oregon, Arizona State, Utah, Colorado, how they have played against the Big 12 in the past. And with those other schools that you see there, how they have fared against the SEC and the Big 10. Oh, want to take off on that for sure. Some of our most popular videos last year was me doing way early previews, in-depth personnel previews of some of the best matchups for week 0 and week 1. Last year, we did Ohio State, Notre Dame, Florida, Utah, Georgia, Oregon, etc. We'll do that again this year. Possibly an Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State personnel breakdown, like position to position, because this could be an epic battle between those three for supremacy in the Big Ten. And then that gave me the idea for other like matchups at the top of other conferences: Clemson, Florida State, Alabama, Georgia, LSU, and others. So just what we're brainstorming here at the Voice of College Football for future content. And we have some exciting news coming up concerning our Patreon as well. All right, folks, appreciate you being here. Have a fun rest of your weekend. You will see me Monday at 6 for the Big Ten show. The Big Ten live show is Monday at 6, if not sooner. And please join us on Discord. Get your Discord 24/7, 365 college football talk all the time. Plus, there's going to be so much more at Patreon. Go to patreon.com, search Mark Rogers TV. Thanks for being here. Appreciate you all. Love talking college football with all of you, and we will see you soon. We will wrap it up unless Connor's got some kind of parting shot, because typically I see that like right before I'm going to leave or right after I leave, Connor's got some kind of parting shot for me. There it is. Connor says, Oregon State better than Michigan. In 2001, they might have been. And actually at Rich Rod's, yes, his 3 seasons there, Oregon State might have been better those 3 years. Yes. And now Tim says he's coming in. Tim, come on in. Why not? We've lost like 90 people. I should stop letting everyone know that we're ending the live stream. Okay, Tim's good. We're good. Oregon State's better than Michigan. I don't think there's any question about that. Oregon State would beat Michigan by at least 7 touchdowns. I think we would see a similar, basically insert Oregon State for Georgia and insert Michigan for TCU. That would be exactly what we would see between Oregon State and Michigan. Absolutely. Connor, you are on it. I'm surprised that, yes, you need to put Oregon State in caps, and you need to try to find as large and greater than sign as you possibly can to just accentuate how much of a joke that is in comparing Michigan and Oregon State. Absolutely. All right. Appreciate y'all being here. Hopefully the sarcasm comes through at times, and we will see you soon. $79-0. That's a good call.